Sonic Super Special Magazine 9. So it seems to just rip off the first cutscene of Lost World. Sonic tells Eggman to drop the animal capsule, which is unrealistically idiotic of him, since he should know that if he dropped it so high in the sky, you'd think all the animals would have been killed from the landing. For all he knows, they would just land. And since they unrealistically weren't even injured, I have to assume they had rings, but we should just be told that. Sonic and Tails probably only got worried because they assumed they didn't have rings. But why do that at this point? Oh, but we don't actually see that. Huh. Instead, we cut back to many days ago. We see the Eggmobile flying towards the floating island of the Lost Hex, with Eggman talking as if he already knows about it. Why? And he thinks it's his ticket to world domination. Eggman can't wait to pave this place over, and he inhales the fresh air deeply despite saying that. Why? And Cubot lampshades that this place looks too much like Green Hill Zone. Not that he'll say the name of that place, because that'd be going a step too far apparently. And Orbot thinks it's a completely original place. And that's the end of that. So already he's gotten their characters wrong. You'd think it'd be Cubot saying something stupid, and Orbot being smart. Though it is realistic that sometimes an idiot can say something smart and so on. Orbot might just have a faulty memory, or have never visited Green Hill. Or Emerald Hill, isn't it like this place too? Now, a truly brilliant writer would actually try to explain why this place looks so similar to a place on Mobius, when it's a place that's outside of it, Little Planet style. But that'll never happen. So he thinks lampshading it when every Sonic fan does that is a free ticket to the writing being seen as brilliant. When I'm still wondering how there's such a geographical similarity between two planets that were never a part of each other. It wouldn't be that hard to have Eggman explain that Lost Hex used to be a part of Green Hill Zone, and then it was separated by a magic spell. Like how Angel Island's from Down Under. Orbot asks Eggman what he and Cubot are doing out here, while appreciating the downtime relatably. I guess Eggman didn't tell them until now, so we could feel good about the fact that they have no choice but to do what he says, and come here, and he doesn't need to tell them anything. Cubot asks if it's Lackey Appreciation Day. Logically, he'd only ask this if Eggman really did have a day like that for his minions, which would be smart of him to try to discourage them from abandoning him, like Snively and the SSS Squad and Breezy all did in the Reboot universe. So he would have gotten character development and learned his lesson from all that turnover. And I can also assume Cubot simply forgot which day it is, or which day the holiday was on, which is also plausible. It'd suck if it was just a joke and there was no such day, because then it'd be forced that he thought there ever would be. But it's not confirmed either way, so... Why does Cubot say he's found something instead of someone? Eggman sure is confident to keep smiling after approaching an alien that looks like a literal devil. Eggman says that he must be one of the fabled Zeti he's been looking for. Fabled? So am I supposed to assume he just found some Zeti manuscripts? Some Zeti stone tablets? Like how he found out about Chaos? It's pretty weird actually to think of an engineer and tyrant like him stumbling into ancient tablets when he's not an archaeologist. He must have searched for ancient powerful sources of magic on the internet and found out where to go to look at the tablets themselves. Like research mythology in the hopes that they be true. You'd think we'd see him find the Zeti manuscripts in Green Hill Zone. That's what a brilliant writer would do from thinking things through. Instead, Eggman knows it's for no reason. Well, this is supposed to be a prequel. Zavok's even surprised that Eggman came here while knowing what he'd find, but instead of asking how he knew, so we get to find out, he just calls him an idiot. And Eggman says he plans on being his new master. What is the point of showing this? Anyone could imagine their first meeting. It takes real creative talent to figure out how he even found out about the Lost Hex. Eggman plans to control Zavok by beating him into submission. Now he looks like an idiot to me. How is injuring Zavok so that he can't do anything for him supposed to make him controllable? If he controls him after that, he'd be useless. I guess later on, once he heals. And of course Zavok was able to jump away from the explosions fired at him, because Eggman gave him warning instead of just saying fire out of nowhere. If he hit Zavok right away, it'd save wasted comic space being faster pacing. It'd be a menacing villain moment for him, showing what he's realistically capable of whenever someone underestimates him. And Zavok doesn't even look scared after that, even though I doubt this has happened to him before. You'd think he'd be startled at least. It's not even trying to portray Eggman as a threat. Zavok is just always in 100% stereotypical cartoon villain mode. He can't ever look scared. He telekinetically takes control of Eggman's robots, as he can do in the game. So, can he control anything with electricity in it? I don't know, can he control electricity itself? Wouldn't he already have robots around him if he wasn't even questioning what those badniks were supposed to be? Implying his planet has no experience with them? You'd think the second he'd meet Eggman, he'd already have robot bodyguards with him. Out of complete nowhere, Zavok reveals that he's played with someone else's machines before. Well, that's interesting. Did that person discover the Lost Hex the same way Eggman did? It has to be Eggman Nega, but you'd think he'd have said Eggman resembles him. I don't think Gerald Robotnik had his own robots, just artificial chaos. But of course, we'll never get any elaboration on this. Not even 2 lines of dialogue where Eggman asked who could have possibly come here with machines other than him. And Zavok could just say, I don't know much about him, but he was like you. He must have been from another country than Eggman if Eggman can't figure out who he'd be, and someone should say this. It's always stopping just short of being really interesting and developing on a story that needs it. Well, I love that Zavok said the badniks had very creative designs. So he's confirming that the last machines he controlled didn't look like badniks. Yeah, that narrows it down. Eggman simply says this is fascinating instead of being realistically terrified. Or already knowing he can do this. It doesn't matter that there's a cartoon art style. That doesn't mean no one should complain about the writing being confusing all the time. Avatar: The Last Airbender was a cartoon for kids, and it wasn't written like this. I love that Cubot asks Orbot in a whisper if they can save themselves by pretending to be brainwashed like the badniks. But again, this is confusing. Cubot's known as an idiot, not the smart one. And yet he's got a smart plan, and is even smart enough to whisper it. But Orbot tells him to shush. He should at least explain to him that Zavok didn't brainwash them because he thought he had no use for them, and if they acted brainwashed, he'd tell Eggman about their ruse and taunt them for their disloyalty. Because he see no point keeping them around at the moment. Then he'd look really smart. But instead it looks like he's encouraging him to be loyal to Eggman just for the sake of it. Cubot had a good idea though, self-preservation the only feasible way. Then Eggman holds something purple over his head, saying, "Ah, right on to the subjugation." So he had that with him all along? Did he find it in the same place he found the Zeddy manuscripts I had to make up for him? It's so obvious this isn't how you write a prequel correctly. It comes off as a confusing Deus Ex Machina to instantly bring Zavok into submission because he played the conch. I have a question, why can't Zavok just punch him to make him stop playing the conch if he's holding his arms in pain and kneels down? It's not like he's being paralyzed. Like if that's the only thing wrong, and it's not literally brainwashing him to be on his side, that just makes things a lot more confusing. Why does he need a conch in particular then? Couldn't he just blast a really loud air horn at him and get the same effect? It's more convoluted than simply being able to brainwash the Zeddy. And why would there be a conch that he could find naturally on Mobius that would brainwash beings from another planet? He has to have found it in Green Hill Zone, the place most similar looking to here. So what, were the Zeddy the creations of ancient Mobians, or descendants of ancient Mobians? And they made a conch infused with energy from a Chaos Emerald to control them? Or the Zeddy used to be ancient Mobians, and they made a conch to control their convicts? Even then, this isn't controlling, it's just punishing. Eggman could accomplish the same thing with a regular whistle. I can tell this is the case because Eggman says he can do this all day, and Zavok relents. It takes a bit to call him master. So couldn't Eggman have just used a regular whistle, or a dog whistle maybe? It's so obvious you're not supposed to write a prequel like this. Where did he get the conch? It's especially confusing because apparently he didn't tell Orbot and Cubot about it ahead of time. Orbot thought he just started collecting seashells. I remember hearing that Flynn was asked about this, and he had assumed the origin of the conch would be explained in the game. And nope, of course not. No writer should ever assume that when they're making a prequel. Worst case scenario, his story would have been contradicted, and who cares? The story's not canon to the game anyways. Not everyone who plays it will read it. It's not included in the game. He should have erred on the side of caution and made up an origin, banking on the idea that his origin would probably be better than what the game would come up with if it's written by people who know nothing about Sonic. It turns out what Eggman wants from Zavok is an army. So he tells him to round up the other Zeddy, Why can't he just use his robots? Wouldn't he have tons of them? Can't he make more of them? It should be explained that he came here on a robot shortage, and he settled down here for a safe place to make a lot more. If all he wants is an army, well, that's pretty simplistic. He always has armies. It should be explained that now that he knows Zavok can control his robots, which you think the Zeti manuscripts would have already warned him about, he would be planning on using the Zeti against Gun, controlling their robots. This is like if Eggman allied with the Iron Queen. And why does the crazy Zed even ask which ones to get? Shouldn't it be obvious by Get Them that he wants all the animals captured? I have a question. Why do they need to capture the animals on Mobius instead of the Lost Hex itself? Wouldn't that be faster? No way that place doesn't have any native wildlife. It's huge. Eggman's an idiot. If he hadn't done this, he wouldn't have alerted Sonic to come follow him to the Lost Hex. The whole plot of the game never should have happened. Wow. The worst thing a prequel can do is make the fact that the sequel even happened look completely ridiculous. Eggman could have stayed in the Lost Hex, made a ton of robots and machines, and even nukes, and waited out and then completely invaded the world and nuked all his enemies when he had the chance. He's supposed to be a genius. He didn't need to make badniks, he could have just gone to Gun. Well, at least the story is interesting to talk about. And why does Zavok think this is beneath the Zeti? I guess because he doesn't like them being ordered around. But why say us when the Zeti always work for something? That's someone being him. It's not like he's morally opposed to capturing animals, which would add interesting depths to his character, and God forbid that ever happen. And it turns out the animals were captured from none other than Green Hill Zone, not any other part of the world. So the Lost Hex appears closest to Green Hill, which it most resembles. Almost like it used to be a part of it or something. Any geologist would probably conclude that. Now let's not explain that. And he shouldn't have wasted an entire page on this. All we needed was one panel at the end that showed Sonic saying that there's no animals and it's gotten quiet around here. Remove those panels and there would have been plenty of room for us to see Eggman search the internet and read some manuscripts. Ugh, why have 2 pages about this? So we see Sonic talk to Tails about this. That was redundant. Anyone could have assumed this happened. Conveniently, Amy has a lead. Why Amy? Oh, because the writer likes her. She doesn't live here. Sonic Battle confirmed that. It turns out Amy was told by one of the small animals that some of the animals were kidnapped. I didn't know those animals could talk. I don't think they did in the game. But they talked at the start of Fleetway, so that's a fine interpretation. But it wouldn't be so confusing if the animal himself told Sonic this, instead of Amy speaking for him. As if we're supposed to assume she somehow read his mind and has to speak for him. The heroes are calling these things animals, right? Wouldn't they only call them animals and not little kids or people if they can't talk? And why isn't Knuckles guarding or looking for the Master Emerald? Why is it perfectly fine with providing Amy with protection instead? She has to stay here and round up some more animals. Oh yeah, just take them all out of hiding and make your job protecting them harder. Why isn't it being explained that the Master Emerald's either underground now or being protected by a robot made by Tails? That'd be one line. As you can see, it's really confusing to have a story in a comic in a completely different continuity from the games be exactly like a game. It makes it look like it's not even canon to the comic. Like it's not following the comic's continuity. I guess I like that Knuckles said sarcastically that if it's not Eggman doing this, he'll eat the emerald. But that just reminded us that the emerald is still a thing. And so anyone who wasn't thinking about it is now guaranteed to think about it. You practically drew attention to the plot hole. There's no indication that this even is canon to the reboot right now. It just feels like an advertisement prequel to Lost World. And the fact that this is its own issue magnifies this. They want it to be separate from the main comic. Well, it was sweet that Sonic and Knuckles fist bumped like it was nothing. They're good friends. They really are great friends if Knuckles is happy with being with Amy instead of guarding the emerald. When he should say, Amy has a hammer, she can protect herself. But no, he has to stay loyal to the game, even though I doubt the writers of the game would see this prequel as canon to it anyways. Or even know it exists. Tails says he's got Eggman on radar. Somehow this is the first Sonic is hearing about this, instead of Tails happily telling him about it right away. And Sonic asks why he's got that. And Tails doesn't proceed to say they use his DNA to make the radar. He could say that he secretly put a tracking device on Eggman while he's distracted. And these panels didn't even need to exist because Sonic immediately sees Eggman, so the page was wasted instead of us seeing Eggman get the conch. Though it was charming seeing Sonic point out clouds 3 times hoping it was Eggman, and then say that a cloud looks like a fat scientist. But if these two had a good dynamic, Tails wouldn't have just told him to get serious. He would have laughed, and that'd be sweet. Didn't Tails have better chemistry with Sonic and AOSCH? Oh, another plot hole. Why didn't they have an Eggman Rotor 5 years ago? What took Tails so long? He could explain that it took 5 years to make. But somehow I don't think tracking devices take that long to make. And shockingly, an entire page is wasted on us showing the present, when we already saw Sonic tell him to drop those critters. And if Tails can fire a laser at the Eggmobile with its plane, no problem. I refuse to buy that the Eggmobile wouldn't have just fallen out of the sky at that point. Nobody says that the Eggmobile's materials are just that tough. Even then, you'd think it'd have to be a very poor conductor of heat, or else the heat from the laser would have fried those 3 from convection. Logically, why would Eggman drop the animal capsule? He wants the animals alive. Why give up that fast? I guess he thinks he could always get other animals. Making the heroes feel awful about provoking their deaths would be worth it. Why in the world did Flynn write Tails to respond to that with, "That's harsh"? He did in the game, but in the game he said, "Whoa, that's harsh." So if he was allowed to change the line, why the fuck didn't he change it completely? Wouldn't he know that everyone thought that line sucked? Because it was way too underwhelming? So it made it look like the writer was detached? He'd obviously shout "no" instead. This doesn't prove that he's better than Pontac and Graf. Also, Flynn's pit Tails and Sonic against each other twice, in Sonic Boom and Archie. So he totally would have written their fight in Lost World. He also wrote a fan comic where Tails was evil, so he was against Sonic. He's worse. After everything I've read, those 2 writers are no big deal to me anymore. I can't believe another page is being wasted on just retreading the story from the game. What was he thinking? The heroes want to swing around on the plane to find the animals, and Eggman predicted that. Why did Orba and Cubot get into the front seat with him? Why didn't Eggman just use the ray gun on the plane immediately, instead of waiting this long? He didn't have to give up the animals. What a moron. Why is another page being wasted? Common sense would dictate he would have an original story throughout. Why approve a writer with so little material of his own to work with that he retreads the game's story to fill up the rest of the pages? And another page is wasted on redundancy. Why didn't Eggman keep shooting at them as long as possible instead of only firing once? This boring story by Ian Flynn was a gigantic waste of my time. Eggman just has the conch. That's it. Why show him meeting Zavok, which anyone could imagine and write, instead of explaining that he looked up ancient mythology on the internet and found some manuscripts from Green Hill Zone that told him about the Zeddy and Lost Hex, which must have once been part of Green Hill Zone. I'm not a professional writer either, and even I came up with a better prequel. I came up with all of this just from talking about this retread. Nothing creative is here.